And okay. Hello and welcome. This is Sheila Kilbane. I'm an integrative pediatrician here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm here with my dear friend and partner in crime, Dr. Paul Smolen, aka Doc Smo. And Dr. Smolen is an amazing individual. I met him when I was doing my friend, Dr. Miller, is one of your partners, or was one of your partners, and she was having her baby. And this was when I was doing fill-in work. And so I went and, you know what? I gotta put my earphones on. Hold on. Um, So while I was filling in, he and I sat next to each other and we would sit and talk after we finished seeing patients for the day. And I loved getting to know you. And then he's got an amazing blog called docsmo.com. And we did, blog and podcasts. And we would do several podcasts over the years. And he was listening to me talk about nutrition and dairy and all the things. And he's come around to the other side now. So we love doing these webinars because we both bring, we have a little different approach to things, and it's also very similar because it's about the best of both worlds. It's never about one or the other. So
I remember when in those days, Sheila. I mean, we're talking about 10 years ago, maybe. I don't know how long
yeah, I
ago.
think so.
A long time ago, ancient history. But I remember you were all about vitamin D deficiency, and you were going on about vitamin D deficiency. And I'm thinking, what is with this lady? She's like, nobody's talking about vitamin D deficiency.
What is wrong?
And it was very clairvoyant of you because now everybody talks about vitamin D deficiency. In fact, we're going to talk about it tonight.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. So how we've laid it out tonight, and I will have the disclaimer that COVID is changing very rapidly. So please forgive this if you watch this 2 weeks later, even 3 weeks later. The information could be out to date, and we did the best that we could to coalesce the information that we found. Dr. Smolen did a tremendous job. He actually is doing the bulk of the COVID numbers, and he's got some graphs. He did a really incredible job. And then I'll come in and talk after he talks about the integrative approach and how we can strengthen the immune system to help keep ourselves healthy through this. So without further ado, if you would like to.
well, I want to thank you for inviting me, for goodness sakes. I mean, I think we're going to have a lively exchange, and like most of these talks, I learn more than I teach. So I'm waiting for the second half of this because that's where the money's going to be. But I'm going to go over what has happened since our last webinar, which was July, early July. A lot has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to put together numbers for everybody, give us some sense of where we are. Atrium Health does gather statistics daily on the number of tests that are COVID tests that are done, the positivity rate in different populations, which is very useful. And even since I made our notes here, it's changed a little bit. We're actually now in an uptick again. It seems like every time we have a holiday, humans are social creatures. We like to get together, we like to be near one another, and we start to see the uptick. So I hope it's not the beginning of another surge. But in general, adult numbers have been in the 5 to 6% of all the tests that have been done are positive. Now, when you get below 5%, epidemiologists think that community spread is really coming to a halt, which was really good news. We're one of the few states that's happening. There's a lot of states are up in the 20s right now.
In Europe, it's increasing as well right now. So
Oh yeah.
we need to.
Well, they went on vacation. They really loosened up and they started traveling. That's what happened. That's what the experts, what I've read, happened. So, but then, early, like beginning of September, the kids' numbers were up in the 12% range. So 12% of tests done on children were positive, which is pretty high. It has since, it dropped last week down to 5.1%. Great news, even with schools beginning to do their thing. And now today, I looked at yesterday's numbers, and kids have bumped up 1% and adults have bumped up 3%. So now we're at kids at 6% and adults at 8%. No, excuse me, the other way around. 8% for kids, 6% for adults. Sorry, 8% for kids, 6% for adults. So still not super high, but the trend is not so good. And the total number of cases in North Carolina has jumped in the last few days. As far as, when kids really get sick and end up in the hospital, not much has changed there. About 20% of adults who get infected with SARS-CoV-2 will end up in the hospital, and about 1% overall, all age ranges, are going to have a very serious ICU or even a death. Whereas with children, it's been pretty steady all through this. It's been 2.5% of all the children who become infected are going to end up in the hospital. That's much lower than 20% for adults, and that really has not changed. So children are getting infected more, but they're not getting sick more, which is great.
Which is different than what we said last time, because it was
Yes.
looking like kids. That's why we just have to, you can't, we're all doing the best that we can with the information as it comes out. So,
Well, the lockdown was such an unusual situation that we really couldn't see what the natural movement of the germ was going to be until we unlocked down.
mm-hmm.
And, we thought that kids had some resistance to this, some unusual resistance. Well, they seem to have an unusual resistance to getting really sick, but they don't have, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, it doesn't seem like they have an unusual resistance to getting infected.
Yes. Yeah.
So you understand see the distinction there? So,
And
if,
I'll just say right now, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but one of the things, one of the reasons that we talk about that could be, and you'll talk about the ACE2 receptors again, but potentially that kid, so the coronavirus, there are many coronaviruses and that kids get infected with, and it may be that they're closer to having been infected so that they just may mount a quicker immune response to this. They just are not getting really sick. It's, just like if you get a cold and you're not getting, you just get it and it goes away very quickly.
Yeah, there's a researcher at UNC Chapel Hill. They're on the forefront of coronaviruses. He spent his life, his name is Dr. Barrick, and he's spent his life studying coronaviruses. And he fully admits, and he's been warning people that this was going to happen. But he made a point that I heard recently. He said that there are 4 different classes of coronaviruses, and we didn't have virologists and state-of-the-art virology labs 100 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever. But he surmises that all of these coronaviruses came out of bats, and that when they did emerge and jump to humans, that the same phenomena that we're seeing right now happened with every cold virus that we take for granted every winter that we get. That the first few years that it came around, it moved around very, very rapidly and made some people very sick, and or they died. And then on reinfection in the population, it becomes a cold and a circulating cold virus. And that's what he thinks is going to happen with this one. Is we're going to have a few years of this unless we have a vaccine to get to herd immunity, and then we're going to start having colds every winter, or maybe it'll be a little more than a cold. Maybe it'll be a flu-like illness that either we get vaccinated against or we just deal with.
Yes, and that potentially that the people, there haven't been many reinfected people, but potentially the reinfection hopefully will be less if that happens very often.
Well, he spoke to this at great length. If you want to hear him, it was on the People's Pharmacy, and it was last week or the week before. And he's a wonderful speaker, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people in the world about this. There's one case. There's been a question whether people could get reinfected. Remember in the last podcast
Yep.
we said, no, they don't get reinfected.
Yep.
Well, we now know you do get reinfected, that your immunity lasts, he says 1 to 2 years, but it can be less than that. It depends on how the individual and their immune response. But he says that there's one documented case of a gentleman from Hong Kong who traveled to Spain, I believe it was, who they have the genome of his infection in Hong Kong, and they have the genome of his infection in Spain, and they're different.
They're different.
He has he got the European strain. Remember you heard about it changing from China to Italy. Well, so they know that he got reinfected. So there's one case where they absolutely know. The South Koreans claim
and the thing that I heard is that he wouldn't have necessarily known that he'd been reinfected if he hadn't been tested.
Exactly. And then here's the point. Good point. He got a cold the second time. That's what he got.
And that was it.
And that's what's been the pattern, is that because to get a case of severe COVID-19, you have to have the lung form. Okay. We all get colds. We all sometimes get bad colds. We might get a sinus infection, but that's, we don't die from that. But when you get the lung form, and then especially if you get this hyperimmune response, then you can die. So he surmises that this will become a circulating cold, and that the germ loses, because we have some immune memory of it. It will not be a lung form. It will be a nose form, and we'll just get a cold after that. But he thinks it's going to take, without a vaccine, he thinks about 3 to 5 years for us to get to that point where that would happen. The vaccine, he thinks it could happen much, much faster. And unfortunately, without a vaccine, then if it's just a 1% mortality rate, with 7 billion people on Earth, that's a lot of people dying.
Will you tell me that gentleman's name again? I want to put it in my notes.
I don't remember his first name. It's Baric, B-A-R-I-C. He runs the virology lab at UNC Chapel Hill, and he's a coronavirus expert. Okay. I can look it up. I'll be looking for it. Okay, so let's just go. So kids, 2.5% hospitalization rate. There have not been any deaths in North Carolina, fortunately, of any child under 24 years of age, and any person under 24 years of age. If you look at all the cases of COVID, about 17% have been in children. The rest of them, 83%, have been in older than 18. If you look at the whole United States, as of August 1st, there were 45 children who died of coronavirus between February 1st and August 1st, compared to 105 who died from seasonal flu during that same period of time. And there were 13,000 children who died during that period from all causes. So that would be, and we all know the big gorilla in the room with childhood death is accidents, car accidents, falling out of windows, that kind of stuff, non-accidental trauma. There are about 73 million children in the United States under age 18. So think about those numbers. 73 million children. Between February 1st and August 1st, there were 45 who died of COVID. And to date, as of the 10th of September, 104 have died. And now we know that the majority of those are kids who have underlying problems. It's the same old record, when we had H1N1, it was pretty much the same thing. It wasn't as severe an illness, but the children who had the most problems were kids with neuromuscular disease, cerebral palsy, seizure. They're just more fragile. They don't cough as well. They don't clear things well. It's a respiratory disease, and that's what you would expect. So a chance of any child in the United States dying from COVID-19, unless they have underlying problems, is extremely remote.
Yes, which is
your chance of winning a lottery is probably higher.
Yeah.
We talked last time about MISC. Remember the really rare post-infection inflammatory thing? We talked at length about it. I think at the time had been only about 125 cases. We're now up to 935 cases. That this is a syndrome that's thought to be an immune-based illness triggered by COVID-19, triggered by SARS-CoV-2, excuse me. And so the number of those cases has increased, but again, 73 million children, 935 cases.
And it's probably not much higher than what what Kawasaki's disease is in the general population.
Correct. It's very much a Kawasaki's kind of, and there are probably other viruses there are other viruses that trigger the same syndrome. We're just having a lot of this virus right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to some good news here. So I'm going to give you three graphs that look at the hospitalization and illness rate broken down by age. So
okay, that means cue me to share my screen.
Do it, Sheila.
I got this covered.
Wait a minute. You
all right.
Okay.
Wait.
There you go.
But we figured out how to do this the other day. Okay, full screen. So I hope you can see this. It's a tad bit, there we go. Tiny bit blurry, but I hope you all can see it.
So the big take home here, well, we're all interested, we're talking about kids, so let's look at the under 18 years of age. So we know that children under 2 years of age are at higher risk of having severe illness than children over 2 years of age. But they didn't break this graph down at 2. They used their dividing point at 4. But 2 seems to be, there's something, kids' immune system seems to have matured enough, or maybe they've had enough coronaviruses, they've had some experience with coronaviruses by the time they're 2. But I don't know what the factor is. But you can see that 15 out of 100,000, or almost 16 out of 100,000, are going to have hospitalization with SARS-CoV-2 under 2 years of age. Well, they listed under 4, but then when you get to the 5 to 17-year-olds, it goes down to 9. Now, follow the graph on down, and you can see when you get to be an older person, you're 65, you're at 321 versus 9.
Yeah.
Then 75 to 84, it's 515. Then 85 and above, it's 793. So your age is the big factor when it comes to risk of hospitalization with SARS-CoV-2. That's the take-home point.
And the one thing I want to say, I was reading something else today. Restaurants are eating inside in restaurants is one of the big places, and we know the super spreader areas also.
Yeah, there was this famous Chinese restaurant in Beijing. I think, no, maybe it was in Wuhan, but where they were just beginning to open up, and they think they had a super spreader near the door, and they left the door open, and they traced the cases down to a row of tables from this person, with the way the air was spreading down in the restaurant.
Oh gosh.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes. And what was your perfume rule of thumb?
We're going to get to that.
Okay. All right.
Don't give all my secrets away here. Okay, so let's stick with the hospitalizations for children. Now we're just talking about children. So go down to that next graph, Sheila. So here's another way of saying the same information. This is rate of hospitalization with COVID-19 by age. And you can see the under 4-year-olds is higher than the 5 to 17-year-olds. And then there's a linear uptick after that. So age is the big, big factor. Okay. So then wasn't there one more graph about this?
Yes. You want to do it now? Okay.
Yeah, what was that graph?
That is the one of higher risk populations.
Oh yeah, so that's important. Okay, so you got to be a graph reader. But in this graph, you really want to start on the right side of the graph rather than the left side of the graph. So
Right.
On the right side of the graph, they've broken down that we have our non-Hispanic white children, and it's done by age. And we're going to really just look at the top line. And they assigned a rate ratio, whatever the heck that is, a rate ratio. They said white people have a chance of illness of 1. And we want to look at other races relative to being Caucasian. So, and we're talking about hospitalizations and severe illness. So as you move left, then we have the non-Hispanic, Asian, or Pacific Islanders. And if you look at their rate ratio, top line, over to the right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. It's 2. So they,
right here.
yeah. So they have twice the chance of having a severe illness than a Caucasian in the United States. This is U.S. data. Then we move over to the next. It's Hispanic or Latino. So remember, white people, the ratio is 1. It's 8 times now. That's very significant. They actually have the highest risk of severe illness and hospitalization. Move a little to the left. Now we're into the non-Hispanic black. That their ratio is 6 times that of a white child, and then the non-Hispanic American Indian, Alaskan Native, it's 5 times. So the point here is that there are big racial differences in terms of the risk of severe illness and hospitalization. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about why that is. But why don't we go back up to where we left off? Where did we leave off? Why do children?
Yep. Why? Oh, here, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. So I need to go back to mine.
Oh, you have the...
I have it pulled up.
Yeah, so you were talking about your, why are kids less likely to get sick?
Yeah, so the last time we told you that children have less ACE2 receptors, the receptors that the coronavirus attaches to, and the thing was that they could expose the same number of germs, but the virus has a hard time attaching, and that therefore they don't get sick as much. I don't think anybody's disproved that, but other theories are that children have a lot of colds and they get a lot of other coronaviruses, and it may be that their immune response is ramped up somehow in a better way than adults are, and that they are less likely to get sick, more likely to become carriers, but less likely to become sick. And that nobody knows if that's right or not. And the other factor, which Sheila's going to talk a lot about it, is that maybe there's just something different about the immune system of a child that they get infected, which is what the data is now showing, which I told you at the beginning. They're getting infected at fairly high rates. They just don't get sick. And they're much more likely just to have a cold. And that's probably because their immune function, especially their innate immune function, which we're going to talk about a little bit, is much better. Okay. So then one of the burning issues is, are children involved in the spread of coronavirus around the community? The last podcast we said probably not, because they weren't getting infected much, and they were certainly not getting sick much. They weren't getting tested much either, because only sick people were getting tested back in March and April. Now we have enough tests that we're doing more epidemiologic, community-based surveys. And the thinking back last July was that they were not involved in community transmission of the sickness, but now people have changed their minds. Now that kids are out and about much more, and a lot of countries have opened up their schools, the kids are they're not getting sick, they're getting infected. And so that a different thinking than we had just a few months ago. Did I make that clear?
You did. Yep.
Okay. We talked about the ethnic susceptibility. We went over that graph. All right. So what's been the experience with schools and universities reopening? There have been some countries that have really successfully reopened schools, especially for elementary schools, younger kids. Denmark, Germany, New Zealand, they've had great success. Israel's had a big failure. They opened up very fast. In May, they went out of their lockdown, and the idea was, okay, this is over, go back to normal life. And so the high schoolers and the middle schoolers and the elementary school kids went back, and it did not take more than about I think it was about 2 weeks before they had a big outbreak. And not only were children getting infected, but adult staff were getting infected. And, I think it was like 3 or 4 days ago, they went back into lockdown. The whole country went back down into lockdown. So they certainly haven't reached herd immunity. They haven't had a good experience with opening up their schools. But there are some places, as I said, Denmark is the most notable that have been open for months. But these are countries where the community spread was very low. And it's different than the United States. We have very high community spread. Like about 1% of people walking around, 1 to 2% are shedding virus. It's there's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there. Charlotte schools, we don't know about the public schools. I don't practice pediatrics anymore, so I don't talk to a gazillion parents. So I have not heard of any tragedies happening. I'm sure they've had some cases, but I think things are going pretty well for the private schools in Charlotte. But I don't know that to be the case.
Yeah, that's as far as I know, that has been the case. And I have to tell you, the parents, I'm still working. The parents that I see, the ones whose kids are in school, the parents are glowing, and they're like, "Hey, good to talk to you." The parents whose kids are at home, they're like, "Hello." Yes. They're like, so yeah, but as far as we know, and I do know of another someone in my close circle who it's a kindergartner, and they have had a few of the little kids test positive. So they're now staying at home for 2 weeks. And I believe the teacher also did get it. But as far as I know, they weren't, the school wasn't revealing how sick people were getting. But as far as I know, the kids were not very sick, and hopefully the teacher isn't either.
Well, when this Abbott test comes available, which is supposed to be very soon, and we can do millions, they think they can produce
Rapid.
50 million a month or something. I don't know, some incredible number.
That would
We're
be
going
great. And I just want to say, I just put in a chat box, Dr. Smolen has some really great podcasts and blogs, and I've just put in the chat box one of his recent blogs that's about the community spread of COVID. That's awesome.
Good. So then we get to the universities. That's a whole nother matter. They're, according to the New York Times, it tracks outbreaks in universities. It's public knowledge. When I checked it about a week ago, the count was 88,000 students, faculty. This includes the hospitals, everything that revolves around a university. So it's not just undergraduates, it's not just students, but it's a lot of kids. And we all heard what happened at UNC Chapel Hill. You would think that if anybody could do it right, they should be able to do it right. They've got one of the best virology labs in the world, and probably the best epidemiology school in the United States, at least. And they didn't make it a week before they had to lock down. And what you don't want to see happen is universities open and then lots of kids get infected, and then you send them home because that's a problem.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this whole fall works out for the university systems. All right, so the next question is, do children have different symptoms than adults when they get infected? I think this is really interesting, and I want to tell you about a app that has been made. It's free. It's called Zoe, Z-O-E. We're going to have a link that Dr. Kilbane's going to share with you. And this is real crowdsourcing. This is epidemiology crowdsourced version. So the people at Mass General Hospital and King's College London got together, made this app, and any parent or any person can download it. And if you have a case in your family, you or your children, uh, of SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19, you put your data in. So it's this huge database that's constantly getting better, with potentially 7 billion people putting data in, the population of Earth. And so the last data I saw, they had 300,000 children who had come down with COVID-19. So they were able to look in a great detail, granular way, at the symptoms that they had. And it turns out, and this is an important point, especially for doctors, that their symptoms are different than what adults get. So what they found is that children do not get, or rarely get, lack of smell. That's not something they complain about. They do not complain of shortness of breath when they get infected. And they do not have a persistent cough, whatever persistent cough means. Nobody defines what persistent cough is that I can find. Is that 2 weeks? Is that a week? I don't know. But anyway, cough is not the major symptom for them. It's fatigue, sore throat, fever, loss of appetite, not loss of smell, but loss of appetite. To me, if somebody walked in my office and they said, "Well, I'm tired and I have a sore throat and I have a fever, and I'm not hungry," I'd say, "Well, you probably have strep throat." That would be my first inclination. And so it's going to be a tough go for pediatricians this winter when distinguishing COVID-19 from strep throat. But if your child has those constellation of symptoms, maybe you should be thinking, could this be COVID-19?
Mm-hmm.
So shortness of breath and lack of smell and a horrible cough are not the symptoms that kids get. That's the take-home point.
I'm so excited about that app. When you told me about that, I hadn't heard about it. I think that that's such a great way to do it.
Yeah. Well, they're going to be able to collect a lot of data really fast. Think about how long it would take researchers to collect that kind of data,
Mm-hmm.
the old-fashioned way. You're going to see more and more of this as the wave of the future for learning about disease.
Yeah.
So now, how is SARS-2 spread? So, we were all told wash our hands and socially distance. That because the initial thinking by the World Health Organization and the CDC was that this was all droplet spread. So when you sneeze or you cough, large droplets of infectious material come out of your nose or mouth and then can shoot, but they're heavy and they don't go that far. That's where the 6 feet thing comes from. And so the thinking was, if you stayed 6 feet away from people and you kept your hands really clean, that this was mostly a spread by surface. You touched a surface and you inadvertently touched your nose or you rubbed your eyes. That's the way people got infected. Well, the thinking has really changed since then for various reasons. But now, yes, droplets can be a way of spread. So if somebody coughs right in your face or sneezes right in your face, you can certainly get infected that way. But aerosols, which are in the air and not visible and can float and can stay suspended in air for long periods of time. With SARS-CoV-2, it's thought to be 3 hours. With measles, it's thought to be days. But that it can float in the air and that somebody can not even be near the person who was sick and inhale the germ or and get sick. And there was this really interesting experiment. It wasn't actually set out to be an experiment. It just happened. And this happened in China, January 19th. A group of 67, no, it was 127 monks went to a religious conference. It's winter, windows closed. They had 2 buses. So, and one bus had 67 monks, and the other had 60. You randomly assorted. Nobody wore a mask. this was really before people really understood that what was happening. And it turns out that one of the people on one of the buses was early sick with SARS-CoV-2. And they went to their outdoor venue, and it was a 2-hour bus ride. I don't know if it was 2 hours each way or 2 hours total. I think it was 2 hours each way. And when they got back, about 5 days later, people started getting sick on one of the buses, but they didn't get sick on the other bus because there was nobody infected on the other bus. And they had, of the 67 on that bus, 23 got sick of the 67, whereas none of the other 60 got sick. And the driver did not get sick on the sick bus because he had the window open. So people began to wonder, well, how in the world did all these people get sick? They must have gotten sick on the bus. And why did they get sick on the bus? Because the air was recirculated on the bus. They all went to the same outdoor conference. Nobody wore masks there. But none of the other people on the other bus got sick. So they weren't getting sick from the conference. They were getting sick on the bus. And that was when the aha moment, this must be airborne as well as droplet spread. And now, the CDC is vigorously debating this. They started to come out with a statement last week that it is airborne. This is a big issue because in hospitals, what kind of PPE do hospital workers need to wear, right? If it's droplet spread, that's one thing, gloves and gowns and not N95 mask. But if it's aerosol, they need the full thing. And we don't have enough of the full thing. And a lot of healthcare workers have gotten sick. So I think that the answer is that it's both droplet and aerosol. Droplets can turn into aerosol. As you expel them, if they're in the air, if it's hot, they can evaporate into aerosol. So there's a fine line between being an aerosol and a droplet. So the new rule of thumb is if you can smell their perfume, you can potentially get their SARS-CoV-2, which puts it in a whole nother perspective, I mean, how you walk by somebody and you smell the cigarette smoke or their perfume, that could just as easily be an infectious person. You're just able to smell it.
But when we do proper protection, right?
Right.
So it creates a much lower inoculum.
Yes. Right. So that brings up the next point, which is, where do masks fit into all of this? And so there was another experiment of nature. Missouri was one of the first states to open up their hair salons, and they had a hair salon. I think this was back in June, where 2 of their stylists, unbeknownst to them, were infected with SARS-CoV-2, and they were masked because the law in Missouri said if you're going to open, you got to be masked. And they served 140 clients who were also masked because the law says you had to be masked, and they had no infections among any of their clients. So think about getting a haircut. I mean, that person is all over you, right? I mean, they're really right in your face for a fairly long period of time. These were women stylists, not these guys getting these quick haircuts. That can take, I don't know, what is it, an hour? How long does it take
a good hour and a half to get this all?
Okay, yeah. So I mean,
to get the gray covered.
masks are very effective. I would encourage everybody to be righteous about masks, especially as the winter comes on, because we know that all kinds of viruses move easily in drier air and colder air, and they survive longer outside us.
And it's that point too of that it is less, there might be a small amount that's exchanged, but when it's a much lower viral count, it's a lot more likely that your body is going to be able to deal with that without it gaining entry. And,
exactly.
Our bodies. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So which brings up the next really big point, that what I've learned recently, which has been really shaking the way I think about this. There's a researcher who wrote an article in New England Journal of Medicine about a week and a half ago. Her name is Gandhi, Monica Gandhi. And she thinks that whether you get really sick or not comes down to the viral load that you get, how much virus you inhale. And if you wear a mask, you are, even if you're around somebody who is expelling the virus, and remember, at least 50% of people who are expelling the virus, we don't know, they don't have any symptoms. So, and I also told you that about 1 in 100 people in Charlotte walking around today are expelling the virus. So if you go to a meeting of 100 people, you're likely to be in a room with somebody who's infectious, maybe as little as 1 in 50. But anyway, so if you have a mask on, you inhale far less virus. And what they're finding is that the rate, when people get infected, they can either get sick or they can become a carrier, right? I mean, how do people become carriers? They're getting infected, but they're getting so little virus, presumably, that they're not actually getting sick. And they're getting immune, too, at the same time. So her point is, Dr. Gandhi's point is that wearing a mask is a way of almost getting a natural immunization. That it keeps you from inhaling a large amount of virus, but you still get infected and you become immune. And there are examples that have happened, cruise ships specifically, where anywhere from 80 to 95% of people who we know have been exposed and by antibody testing, et cetera, have become immune and they become carriers, but they've not gotten sick. So that's really good news
They could
in my mind.
still pass it. They would just be less like, if
Yes.
when they're, in that period where they're infectious, they could pass it, but if you have a lower viral count, you're a lot less likely to pass
Yeah.
it.
Plus, they also don't have a runny nose and a cough and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, singing next to you in church, yeah, that's a good way to do it with an asymptomatic person. And we have examples of that happening, lots of examples of that happening. But if you're not coughing and blowing your nose and touching your nose all the time and coughing droplets out, then you're much, much less likely to spread to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So again, masks are the key there.
Yeah. And then we have a question from Ashley. Not sure if y'all are able to weigh in on type of masks, cloth, surgical, N95,
Yeah, yeah, we
kids
can
when
do
they
that.
return to school.
I have a whole podcast on that subject, Ashley. So go to my website. I've done about 9 podcasts on COVID, and there's a lot of really good information about masks. My wife is very into making masks, so I know a lot about masks. She makes great masks. But the tighter, so if you use a cloth mask, not just a paper surgical mask, it needs to be tightly woven cotton, 600 thread count or higher. It needs to have at least 2 layers. 3 is better, and it needs to be as tightly fit to your face as possible. My wife makes these masks where you can put an extra filter in, so it becomes a 3-layer mask, and they're disposable. The filter is disposable, so it's really quite cool. In terms of the least effective masks are the bandanas. Just putting a kerchief over your mouth. It's not really stopping very much. Um, as I say, the cloth masks need at least 2 layers. 3 is better. Needs to be fairly tight to the face. Needs to have a nasal bridge that you can close. They're all going to let some stuff escape, but that lets the least escape. Then the most effective are the N95s, the ones that are still in great short supply. And, they do what they say, 95% of particles are filtered.
Yeah.
So 5% are going to escape.
And the N95 are tough. I mean, they're not the most comfortable things on the planet. So that's
Yeah. And
anyway.
they're multiple layers. They're hard to breathe through as well. It's hard to wear one of these things
Yeah.
all day long. Do we miss any other kinds of masks?
Yeah. What about the KN95? That's just the N95, right?
I think so. Maybe that's, There's been some controversy about the ones that come from China, that their quality is not as good as the 3M N95s, but you can't get them. I mean,
Yeah.
the hospitals need them.
Yep. Yep.
You know.
So Ashley's saying, but you can get them at Lowe's. That's true. Or paint stores. Paint stores.
Oh yeah.
You might be able to get them. Yeah, at paint stores. I was looking on Ace Hardware website, and they actually had some of the N95. So.
Well, I have a wood workshop, and I can visually see what they do. And I've used these things for years, and I wasn't very, righteous about them. I mean, I don't throw them away very often, and so you can see how the dust comes around because dust is visible. Wood dust is visible. You can see that it does let stuff in, and I'm sure it lets stuff out as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the immune support. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. So I would encourage everybody to use masks. Kids under 2 really can't mask, but they say that children over 2 can get used to masks. And in my podcast, I give a bunch of ideas of how to get children used to wearing a mask. The main thing is that they're going to do what you tell them, and they're going to do what you do, especially young kids. So it's lead by example. It's important.
Yeah, and I put a link to that podcast in the chat box, and we'll send around a link to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about afterward, and to your books. We'll talk about your books a little bit
Okay.
too.
Well, that would be good.
Yes.
So now we're coming into flu season, and flu and COVID basically have the same symptoms. It's a lower respiratory disease, like a lot of other viruses as well. So there's some really good news here. I hope everybody's heard this, but when we have winter below the equator, they have summer and vice versa. So we've just had a winter below the equator. They're just coming out of winter and going into spring. We're just going into fall and then into winter. And they found that, we have a graph of this, there's been a 99% drop in the rate of influenza cases in the southern hemisphere in the last 6 months. You want to show them the graph?
Yes.
It's
Let me
quite
show you.
dramatic.
It's really, this is it. I'd say this is one little silver lining.
Yeah.
I don't think we can extrapolate it fully to us, but I think at least somewhat.
Yeah. And we have no idea how many people were immunized, but look, the little light pink lines are seasons prior to 2020. Okay, so 2015 to 2019. And that's the number of cases on the vertical axis and the months on the horizontal axis. So you can see they do what we do. Every winter, they have a surge of cases, and it peaks a few months after it starts, and then it trails off, and then flu is a seasonal disease. There's very little of it in hot weather and a lot of it in cold weather, and it comes in epidemics. Well, look at what happened in 2020 in Chile and in New Zealand and Paraguay and all these countries. It didn't come. It just didn't come. And I'm sure that is not because they did a great job of immunizing people against the flu, because the flu vaccine is only about 70% effective on a good year. No, people were wearing masks. They were socially distancing. They were washing their hands. They were doing all the things that Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci told us to do. And look at it. It didn't come.
It's there. We have a wonderful integrative doctor in Charlotte. He's a colorectal surgeon who does functional and integrative medicine. And I was looking at his website this past week, and he has a really great post of, how to keep yourself healthy. And he has a poster from 1918, and it's exactly the same things: wash your hands, social distance. I thought that was good.
Those were smart people back there. They didn't even barely knew about viruses, and look what they figured out. Grandma was on it, man. So anyway, I think personally that what's going to happen in the future, once we get past this pandemic, I think this is true in the Asian world. Although I've never been to China, I've never been I went to Shelby one time, but I've not been much farther than that. Uh, but they wear masks all winter long. They wear during the sick season. Everybody wears a mask, and I mean, I remember. I shouldn't say I've never been anywhere. My wife and I went to Europe a few years ago, and we were in uh, the Czech Republic, and we were going through some place. And this is in the summertime, and there were these Chinese tourists who with wearing masks. They were wearing masks in July in the Czech Republic. I mean, they're very conscious of this, and I think it's going to become norm in this part of the world that we wear masks in the wintertime, especially to prevent influenza. And I think a lot of this stuff is preventable if we get past our mask resistance.
It's tough, especially
It's tough. We just need some movie stars to just show us the way, right? Make it trendy.
Too bad you and I aren't trendy enough.
Yeah, we're not trendy.
No.
We're probably trendy in a bad way. I don't know.
It's just we like to think that we are.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's sort of was what I wanted people to know. That's what's been new since our last podcast. And I think Sheila is really going to get us up to speed on what we can do to improve our own health that will make us much more resistant. Because obviously there's tremendous difference in our body's resistance to this illness. I mean, some people it's nothing, and other people it puts them in an ICU on a ventilator and ECMO for months. I mean, so this infection is really more about us than it is about the virus.
Yeah. And it's so as I'm going to get into the part that I'm going to talk about. And what I really want to stress is that we have this overall picture. So we know whether you're a child or adult, it's inflammation, it's poor health, it's poor nutrition, other inflammatory diseases, heart disease, diabetes. And what we really want to do is we want to look at it from an overarching standpoint. And what we love to do in conventional medicine, we love to do as humans, is we love to have this one silver bullet that's going to solve everything. Is it remdesivir? Is it, the coalescent plasma? What are we going to do that's going to solve this? Is it a vaccine? And it's, because even if if and when we find a vaccine for this, vaccines are not 100% perfect. They don't last forever typically. I mean, look at the flu vaccine. It lasts for a period of time, but it by the end of the season, the flu virus has shifted. And so what we really need to do is we need to look at it from this overarching picture. And that's why I could never say, okay, take, one or two supplements and that's perfect. And we definitely talk about things. And I have had a list of supplements that we'll send around afterward that because I have the dosing and I have it all listed on a handout. So you don't have to worry about taking notes hurriedly taking notes, because we'll send that around afterward. But what I really want to stress tonight is our overall immune system. One of the number one ways that we can support our immune system is by optimizing our digestion. So a significant amount of our immune system happens in our gut. We have something called immunoglobulins. And what these immunoglobulins do is they help to bind viruses, bacteria, and then they help us excrete them before they get absorbed into our system. And it's so think about infants. So colostrum it's immunoglobulins, and that helps to keep babies healthy while their immune systems are developing. And I'll talk about there's a researcher doing some cool research around this. So I'm gonna first give you a little bit of a quick, I hope you find this as interesting as I do. I'm gonna do a quick GI lesson, and I'm going to so Deb Allen, who is the integrative pharmacist in our practice, when she and I started working together probably 5 or 6 years ago, she just kept talking about digestive enzymes. And at the time, I hadn't read any research about digestive enzymes, and I just thought, I don't think we need to use those. And the further we went on, and the more I read about them and read the research and read about food, undigested food, and the inflammation it can cause in the GI tract, I think we need to back up and really look at how are we digesting our foods. And it's our digestion is so compromised in this country and in other countries. I think specifically in our country also, because we are eating fast food. You know, about 30% of our digestion starts before we even start to eat food, where we salivate, we're thinking about the food, that starts to release our digestive juices. And we have one of the number one over-the-counter selling medications are antacids, and that harms that nice mucinous layer in the gut. And we talked about this briefly on the last webinar, but people who are on PPIs, those proton pump inhibitors, are 2 to 4 times at higher risk of being diagnosed with COVID than someone who's not on it. So why is that? What's happening? I'm gonna pull up my, all right, it's harder to navigate and speak. So here we go. And Paul, can you see could you see the questions? Like if you hit chat box, you can kind of start to see.
Let me just start looking at them.
Well, you could just sort of keep an eye out. Okay, so here, this is the picture of one of our epithelial, a cell, right, an enterocyte right along our GI tract. And there are 4 layers, 4 different areas that really make up our immune system. And so instead of talking about how, because we're working on medications and things that are going to help it. And this is the thing that we can do with our system. So one is the gastric acid. So that's where if we're on a PPI, I would work with your doctor, do everything you can to come off the PPI. When I work with kids, that's one of the first things we do if they are on an antacid, is we just work to improve that. The second thing is mucus. We have a nice mucinous layer along the GI tract. Different medications like NSAIDs, so that's ibuprofen, Advil, they're all the same thing. Those non-steroidals that people might be on for pain, they might be on them for, if you have a headache, if you have arthritis, things like that. So we want to use those sparingly and only when you need it. And then the third thing are digestive enzymes. So digestive enzymes are what help to break down our food. We have proteases that break down our protein. We have lipases that break down our fat. And it's really important that our food is getting fully broken down so that we can digest and absorb it. And then the other thing with the gastric acid is we need a good amount of acid in our stomach to activate our pancreatic enzymes in order to break the food down. And then we talk about bile flow. So bile is what helps us digest and absorb our fats. And we have so many issues now with people with hormonal challenges, women who aren't able to get pregnant, people with, their hormone cycles are off. So that's another place we really want to make sure that we're digesting and absorbing our fats. And also when it comes to the bile from the gallbladder, the bile is going to do more than any supplement we could ever use to keep the environment in the small intestine more balanced. We shouldn't have a whole lot of bacteria in the small intestine. And some of you may have heard of something called SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And that is the way that we look at it in our practice, is that it's more a function of motility. We need to keep that motility in the GI tract. So we need to always be moving food down so that we can excrete it. And so then the fourth area of our immune system is peristalsis. So that is what we're talking about. Our GI tract is always contracting so that it's moving the food down. And if we have a significant amount of inflammation, either from poor nutrition, things like that, we're not going to have that good peristalsis. And how do you know if you get heartburn, if you're burping a lot after you eat, if you get constipated, if you're not having bowel movements every day? Notice too, if you get really rosy cheeks, if you have skin rashes on your, bumps on your cheeks, on the back of your arms, those might be signs that you're not fully digesting, absorbing, and eliminating things quite the way that we would like you to. So one of the things that we use a lot in our practice are our digestive enzymes, and this is part of the reason, because the environment of the gut is so important for our overall functioning of our immune system. And to say, okay, I'm going to do all of these supplements over here, but I'm going to have it's the old joke my sister always used to say, I'll have a Big Mac and French fries and a Diet Coke. And it's, it defeats the purpose of all of that. So number one always is we want to make sure that we're paying attention to our nutrition. And let me get myself back here. And it's 6:02. So I will just go through this. If you all are needing to hop off, you can. We will stick around for a little bit and answer questions afterward. So the number one thing I'm going to say is artificial dyes and colors. Those harm that nice mucinous layer of the GI tract. So when you're reaching for the box of sugar cereal for your child, see if you can swap out and do a smoothie, maybe do some scrambled eggs, some whole grain toast with nut butter, things like that. You want to decrease simple sugars. Simple sugars, studies show that if you have the amount of sugar that's in 2 sodas, 2 good sized sodas, that suppresses your immune system for up to 5 hours. And one of the first things that we do with kids, right, is we'll reach for a soda, they'll reach for Gatorade when they get sick so that we keep them hydrated. And yes, you do want to keep them hydrated, but there is a great electrolyte drink called Ultima, Ultima. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it in almost any health food store. And it's a really great to keep hydrated. And it's not going to have all of the junk and all of the sugar in them. Then the third thing is just staying well hydrated. And that's where we will use that Ultima. If kids don't like water and they prefer to have something with a little bit of flavor in it, that is a great option so that we're not doing a lot of juices, which can have 4 ounces of juice has almost the same amount of 4 ounces of a soda. So we want to really be careful with that. And then managing stress. So breathing, talking to, if you need to talk to a counselor, doing meditation, yoga, and just simply breathing. So Andrew Weil always talks about the 4-7-8 breath. So what that is you breathe in for 4 counts. So, and I would love for you all to do it. So Doc Smo, are you ready to do a little breathing? I didn't warn you about this ahead of time. So
I know about Dr. Wheel's breathing. It's different than the Apple Watch breathing though.
Yeah. And you have to just find what's best for you. When I'm doing that breathing, I need a little bit of I breathe longer than 4 counts. So I do it a little bit differently, but in general, you breathe in slowly for 4 counts. You hold it for 7, 2, and then you breathe slowly for 8 seconds. And when you extend your exhalation longer than your inhalation, that activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your nervous system that helps you relax. And that is what also activates the healing mechanism. So doing that, getting outside, fresh air, running around barefooted, physical activity releases endorphins. Considering doing hot cold, that stimulates the immune system. So I have a little portable infrared sauna at home. I will do that, and then you can get into a cold shower. Getting adequate rest. I don't think that can ever be stressed enough. And I'm going to go through the supplements when I just want to make sure. I don't want to ever talk about supplements if I haven't really laid the foundation that food comes first and supplements are solely a support for that. So immune boosting foods, fruits and vegetables are the things that hold the test of time with research. They have the antioxidants, the phytonutrients. This is what we want to have supporting our system. And a couple things I'll just point out, a few different foods. So broccoli sprouts, they have something called sulforaphanes. I can never say it. And those help promote the immune system. They combat chronic inflammation, protect the brain, restore cognitive function, promote detoxification, prevent cellular damage, enhance antiviral responses. So that's just one thing. And you can get it from the adult broccoli. You just have to eat a whole lot of the adult one. The sprouts have about anywhere from 20 to 40% higher nutrient content than the adult plant. And then we want to do other things, the potent things like turmeric, herbs and spices. So turmeric, black pepper, ginger, thyme, bone broth. Bone broth has actually been shown to stimulate white blood cells. That's where the studies that show how it helps to fight the common cold. Fermented foods or probiotics, and other things like green tea, coconut oil, chia seed, hemp seed, flax seed. And then, so I wanted to just go through those, and now I'll go through the supplements. So the way I always lay it down are we want to do the foundational supplements, and those in my practice it's a probiotic and a digestive enzyme, vitamin D. So there's a lot that we don't know about COVID, but one thing that we do know is that people with adequate levels of vitamin D do better. So you want to keep that. I check all my patients for their vitamin D levels, and we want to have that between about 40 to 60, it's nanogram per deciliter. And that you want a good fat soluble, because vitamin D is fat soluble. You also want to be careful. You just don't want to take a whole bunch of it because you can overdose on it. So I use a supplement. It's got vitamin D3 plus K2. K2 is what we get from green leafy vegetables, and that helps our bodies to utilize the vitamin D. Then omega-3 fats, and I use fish oil. You can use plant-based omegas. You can do cold water sockeye salmon. You can use chia seed, flaxseed, hemp seed, walnuts. Those are all foods that have a good amount of omega-3 fats. If the kids aren't eating those things, then I would do a supplement. But if they're eating those things, that's great. And then I do a whole food supplement or a multivitamin mineral. My preference is a whole food supplement because you're getting the whole foods and you get really good absorption. I, in particular, like one that's called Juice Plus. There are many different ones on the market. Garden of Life has a whole food product. Greens First has a whole food product. So, you can find the one that's right for your family. I also prefer whole food supplements because they don't have vitamin D in them. I like to be able to control the vitamin D with my patients because I don't want kids to be getting vitamin D over the summertime as long as they're getting adequate sunlight. And in general, it's about 15 to 30 minutes of sun exposure without sunscreen, but without burning, which can be a little challenging in Charlotte in the summertime. And most multivitamin minerals have the vitamin D in it automatically. So, and that's okay. If that's what you have, then that's fine. We just want to make sure that we're getting an adequate amount of vitamin D. And then when it comes to COVID, sort of the extra supports that we're talking about are, so quercetin. Most of you have heard about quercetin and zinc. And what happens is that the zinc levels, we want to increase the zinc levels intracellularly, and that's going to slow the replication of the virus down. And so the zinc quercetin combination is what we think is that the quercetin is actually going to help the zinc get into the cells and, you know, potentially help to prevent the illness or if you get it. So what I'm saying with the families in my practice is, if I don't necessarily think you need to take it all the time, but if you know you're going into a higher risk situation, or if they get exposed, or if somebody at home gets diagnosed, then I would go ahead and start the quercetin and zinc, and I'll talk about a few others. But when we're talking about a single mineral like zinc, we don't want to do a high dose for an extended period of time. We want to do it for maybe a 6 to 8 week period of time. But if you are not, if you're not checking your levels, I wouldn't do it for, you know, 5 months. I wouldn't take 30 milligrams of zinc for 5 months, because that can throw your copper levels off. So we just want to, you know, use it when we need it. And then, you know, that's why I'm kind of reserving it for when we need it with these kids. And then vitamin C, many of you have read a lot about vitamin C. Vitamin C has many benefits. Well, before I go off the quercetin and zinc. So there was a study, and Doc Smo had pointed this one out to me, and it was healthcare workers in Turkey. And they broke them down. And the study is still ongoing, so we don't really have great data yet, but they broke them down into 3 different groups, and they were using quercetin and zinc in these groups. And so far it was looking like they don't have case that the healthcare workers are doing quite well. But one of the things that we talked about the other day when we were getting prepared for the webinar is that they also have some pretty low numbers. So I don't think that that's enough to say that these two work together. And then the other thing is, there is another one of the ICUs, which I'll put this handout on the information that we're going to send out. But there is a hospital in Virginia that has a really beautiful, it is Eastern Virginia ICU. And their protocol includes quercetin, zinc, vitamin C, which I thought was remarkable for a hospital setting. But I'll send the link around so that you all can see what their protocol is. And then when it comes to vitamin C, that vitamin C, especially in my practice, we use liposomal vitamin C, which gets really well absorbed, and we get good cellular penetration with that. And it's vitamin C, we know is anti-inflammatory. It's got some antiviral properties. It may help to protect the lungs. And that, you know, some places are also doing vitamin C through IV. And I have to double check if they're doing it IV or if they're just doing it oral at that East Virginia University, or I'm not saying the right. And then a few other things there are that these we're using, but I use them more sparingly. So glutathione. So glutathione is our master detoxifier of our liver. And as we're asking our body to do a lot of work, that glutathione is just going to help to support those detoxification pathways. You have to be careful though with glutathione, because you can have reactions to it if you have a lot of toxin burden on your body. So if you don't have bowel movements regularly, maybe you're in an environment that has a little bit of mold, things like that, you can have a little bit of a reaction to glutathione. So you just want to be careful with that. And then a couple other things that are super safe are turmeric. Turmeric has potent anti-inflammatory impacts. And then there's a supplement called Brocolite, and that is similar. So that's going to have those properties, those sulfopuriphanes, and it's just a really good product that the sulfopuriphanes are nice and stable, and your body is actually able to absorb them, and it's got some really good research behind it. I think let me make sure that I have said most of the things. Do you have any? Oh, melatonin. That is another thing that has been showing some promise. And so melatonin, it's got anti-inflammatory properties, and there's some specific markers that it has been shown to decrease. And one of the proposed mechanisms or reasons, partially potentially why older people are having more severe issues with this disease. So our melatonin gradually decreases over time. And when we're young, we have a good amount of melatonin. So that's, just a proposed mechanism. But I know my friend out in California, who's a wonderful pediatrician, Alyssa Song, she felt that her son actually was hospitalized with COVID, and she really felt like the melatonin helped him to turn the corner when he was in the hospital. So again, that's an N of 1. And I want to go back to melatonin though, because 70% of our serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. And 70% of our serotonin is made in the gut, specifically by our E. coli bacteria. Serotonin is one of those neurotransmitters that helps us feel good. It also contributes to peristalsis. And so we need enough serotonin that's going to help us make our melatonin. And so that's just another piece of that puzzle when it comes back to gut health. And then the last thing I think that I want to talk about, maybe two other things, are immunoglobulins. So immunoglobulins are those, we talk about that when it comes to breast milk, colostrum, and there is some interesting work going on. I have to find, so there is a researcher out of New York who is, I think, Mount Sinai, and she's studying the molecules in breast milk. And the thought is that potentially women who have been infected with COVID, who have recovered, that they are passing some protection through their breast milk to the babies. Now, this has not been confirmed. She is just collecting, and I'm going to include her information. So if any of you are breastfeeding, you can freeze your breast milk and send it to them so that you can contribute to the study. And I think they had maybe 900 people participating so far. So I thought that was great. And an immunoglobulin is another one of the things that I use in our practice. We use a product called Mega IgG, and it's actually from the serum of cows. And so it's pooled serum, and it's what those immunoglobulins do, again, is they bind to bacteria and viruses in the gut, and they help our body to excrete them through the stool so that we're not absorbing them. And then the last thing is elderberry. So elderberry is, it's a potent antioxidant. We know there has been a study that's shown that it can help decrease the risk of getting influenza, but it hasn't been shown that it prevents the coronavirus. But in fact, because elderberry does stimulate your immune system, if somebody gets diagnosed with COVID, you want to stop the elderberry. You can use it, in the way that I like to use elderberry is if you have allergies, you use it through the allergy season, or in the wintertime, again, if you have an illness that is around, you use it for those periods of time. So you just want to be careful also if you have an autoimmune condition, you don't want to use elderberry because that is going to stimulate your immune system, and not necessarily what we want to do when you have an autoimmune condition. So I found this, here is the information about it. This is about the breastfeeding. It's Dr. Powell, who is a professor of infectious disease at Mount Sinai. So I'm going to just put this in the chat box. And so in summary, for me, it is, we want to look at that bigger picture, always look at nutrition, look at managing your stress, eating properly. And then I do have this host of supplements that can support your immune system. We can't say, we don't have studies that are showing that these supplements are, treating we can't say that they're, we don't know right now that they can treat COVID, but what we know is when we boost our immune systems and decrease our inflammation, that's going to give us the best chance at, if we do get exposed and we get a little bit, hopefully we'll just convert to being, not get very sick and become immune, or potentially even help us prevent ourselves from getting it. Does all that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Do what your grandmother told you. That's Doc Smo's.
That's my life credo.
That's true. I agree. So do you want to say anything, and then we'll sort of wrap it up a little bit, and then we can answer some questions?
Well, it's really fascinating to listen to you talk. I mean, you guys have so many tools in your toolbox that the average doctor doesn't have, or knowledge, that it's quite humbling.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Well,
you know,
that's, I don't know what to say to that.
it's true.
I do feel like it has, I felt, as I've gone through the integrative medicine training, I have gotten more and more confidence in my ability to work with challenging cases,
Yeah,
because I do feel like it's when you really take the microbiome, and, we now know we have microbiome in our gut, in our mouth, in our sinus passages, our vaginal
right.
canal, on our
Hmm.
skin. So we have microbiomes all over our body, and that plays such a significant role in our overall health.
Melatonin in your gut?
Yes.
Melatonin in your gut? I mean, this
No,
is
not
like,
well, serotonin. So we produce
oh,
serotonin in our gut,
I was gonna
and
say,
then serotonin is the precursor to melatonin from a chemical standpoint.
okay,
You add a chemical group.
okay, because I think I need a refund from my medical school tuition if
No,
melatonin comes out of your gut, because that
no,
is not what they told us. But anyway,
no refund.
well, I hope people found this useful. I like to joke with my blog that I want to create the best informed parents in the room, and I think you have just done that. Really giving people a lot of really great information. And I think that people who really take the whole pandemic seriously and study and listen and question, like the people tuning in tonight, they're going to be the best informed parents in the room.
I think so. And I think the way, I always love how you are able to synthesize the information. And Doxmo has been the one, both times, he's able to really get this into a nice fluid order, because there's always so much information. And I love the way that you're always able to synthesize it down. He's like, okay, come on, Sheila, we
Well,
we
10
gotta
years
get
of
on.
doing a podcast every week, you better be pretty,
You,
that's from writing to recording. You better be pretty good at taking a lot of information and putting it into, synthesizing it into a small amount of time.
yes. And I mean, we put a bit of, I mean, all the work that we did separately, and then we talk for a couple of hours,
Yeah, yeah,
at least an
yeah.
hour, a couple
Well,
different
I'm
things.
always the biggest beneficiary of all this. What I learned, that I'm always
No.
the biggest beneficiary.
Oh my
No doubt about
gosh.
that.
That is, no, I would say that I am. Um, so it looks like we have, and that's all. I mean, I think in summary, we would say, doing the things that we know, good hand hygiene, wearing your masks when you're out in public, eating well, um, staying away from the super spreading events in the super
Yes,
spreading areas.
staying away from poorly ventilated small areas where people are loud, particularly excited, sporting events, elevators, choirs, singing. You know, this is where the problems have been that we've recognized.
Mhm.
Bars. That's why everybody's talking so much about bars. People get loud.
Uh-huh.
You know, they
And then
yell and.
you have a couple of beers and you let your guard down and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you will, you know.
We're social creatures. I never realized quite how social we are. We crave each other's attention.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's and especially the teens. I think this has maybe been the most difficult on the teens because that's when you need your people the most. You need your other
Hmm.
teens, and it's, you know, you can only do play so many video games and connect that way for so long
Right.
before you really
Right.
need to see
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So we might be getting past Dr. Schmo's bedtime.
Yeah. I mean, I had a nap today, but that only goes so far. You know.
All right. Do you have maybe 5 minutes we'll do?
Okay, 5 minutes. Yeah, I'll give you
Okay.
whatever I got.
All right. Awesome. So, um, okay. So Erica asked, as part of the COVID plans at school, they are currently in session. The children are being asked to use alcohol-based hand sanitizer extremely frequently throughout the day. Is this appropriate and safe for elementary school age children? You know, one thing I think that should be fine. There is a product, and I actually set it next to me so I wouldn't forget. So it's called Briotech, and it's hypochlorous acid. It has been shown to kill this COVID. At the last webinar we did, it had been shown to kill coronaviruses, but they hadn't been able to test it on this COVID-19, or sorry, the SARS-CoV-2, but it has since been. So I don't know if if you could pull up the research for this, if you just, I'll send this around too. There's a link that shows that it has been shown. And this is what we're going to use in my office. We're opening up in October. This is what I take around. You can spray it on your face. You can spray it on your hands. It's completely safe. It's what our white blood cells make. And that's what helps. It's called the white cells secrete it, and then they phagocytize the bacteria, viruses in our system. And this company, they are out in Seattle. They have figured out how to make it stable and put it in a jar, or a jar, a spray bottle. So they've made cleansers, that you can spray on tables. So, maybe your school would be open to looking at that. But I think the alcohol should be fine for school age kids. How do you agree with me on that one?
I agree. Soap and water will be better, but it's not practical. So um, you got to do what you got to do.
Yep.
Life is all about compromises.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Katie is asking, if we were on PPIs, what can we do now to help build a healthy acid level again? I understand indoor environments are not safe. What are your thoughts on the safety of restaurant, outdoor patios, playgrounds, etc.? So if you are on a PPI now, I would say, consider working with a good integrative or functional medicine doctor. Some of the first things I would do, a probiotic and a digestive enzyme to begin with. And you can also just start doing apple cider vinegar. You could take a teaspoon of it, and if you need to, put it in a little bit of water and take that before you eat. That's literally just giving yourself some acid. And think about your stress, so because that also is going to play a big role. And then you just gradually, and you have to really wean off of PPIs, because what they do is when you take it, we suppress the acid, and then our body makes a hormone that says make more acid, make more acid. So if you stop it quickly, you're going to have this big rush of acid, and you're going to think, I'm worse, I have to stay on these much longer. But if you gradually do it, the way I wean it, I usually just decrease the dose by about 25% each week. So we'll do it over maybe about a month. And I just go very, very slowly.
Yeah.
So
Drink more water. Don't eat in the evening, because most people have heartburn, have it at night because there's a surge of acid at night. If you wake up in the middle of the night with heartburn, you can just go get some water. That will immediately buffer. It's not an antacid. It's got to be good for you. Might have to go to the bathroom more, but you have to deal with that. And not eat within 3 hours of going to bed, especially fatty food, because that slows the gastric emptying. So those are my suggestions.
yes, yeah, I love that. Okay, we'll do one more because I think we're losing our friend here. So there's a question about, okay, why did my doctor recommend dry vitamin D? I am a weight loss surgery patient, light skin, freckled, but tend to have low levels of vitamin D and B12. I don't know what a dry vitamin D is.
I don't either.
I don't know if that's a supplement. I have been using liquid vitamin D supplements for years, and long ago, even when I was doing primary care, I did the liquid, the oil, because it's an oil based, and I was checking levels, and when I was using other supplements, I wasn't finding the levels increasing. So that, but you can't, there are some good capsules that you can get. So I'm not sure. You could ask your doctor, but again, it's the vitamin D3 plus K2 that I prefer to use. Oh, good. You answered a bunch of questions.
I did answer some of them, yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You all were an incredible audience. And I agree with Dr. Smolen, is that you're taking this seriously. And I think it is. We've seen all over the globe that we're having areas that are increasing again. And so we just want to be careful and be safe. And we will send around a recording of this, and we'll put together some of the links that we used. And check out Dr. Smolen's book. And I want to tell you about his book, though, first, before we get off the line. So he's got 2 books, and they're amazing. And the one of the most recent ones, I have to pull up the names so that I don't say the names incorrectly, is
Great kids don't
Great
just
Kids
happen.
Don't Just Happen. And
Well,
it's
let me just tell you about it real fast. So it's a culmination of my 35 years in pediatrics. You get to get involved intimately in people's lives over a long period of time, and you see some parents make it look really easy, and their kids turn out great, and some parents just struggle along. And it may be more about the child than the parent. I don't know, but I tried to synthesize what I noticed about families that raise what I call great kids. And it's 5 essential features that I think parents need to supply their kids to raise great kids. I think it's an interesting read. It's based on, they're not real stories. I made up stories, but they're sort of based in reality, and a lot of research about what good parenting is all about and what kids need. So I think you'll come out at the other end of that book having a lot of insight into yourself, as well as knowing what children need. And that was my goal.
And they can get it on Amazon or on your website.
Well, on my website is just a link to Amazon. Amazon's the big gorilla. Everybody buys their books on Amazon, it seems like. They can get it at Barnes & Noble. They can get it at Park Road Books. They can get it at Apple Books. But it seems like everybody buys from Amazon. If you want an autographed copy, I do that at Park Road Books. So you just call them, and then I go by and autograph the book for you.
Oh.
Personalize it for you.
Very good.
So that's been fun. Makes me feel like a big shot,
You are a big shot. I'm going to put the link here because that just made me think of something else. Okay, and then you have a second book.
Well, it was my first book, Can Doesn't Mean Should. That was my first book. I learned so much doing my podcast that I thought I need to really share this in a way other than the podcast. So I wrote the 20th century and the 21st century, we can provide our kids with things that no generation has ever been able to provide. Our wealth is just far beyond imaginable for the history of the world. And so parents that presents them with a lot of dilemmas. I mean, should I do this? Should Johnny have a TV in his room? Should he have an iPhone in his pocket? Should we go through the drive-through 6 times a week? And should I train him to be a professional athlete? What is the evidence of all this stuff? What are we doing to kids? So it's that line between can and should, and that's what the book's all about. So I don't give you an answer. I present the information, and I say, here are the questions. You got to figure out what's best for your family. So it's sort of a thought experiment for parents, and giving them a lot of information at the same time.
Well, and you have raised two amazing kids yourself. And his son is a professional flute player out in California, and he's doing some really cool, they're doing free online concerts right now. My mother and I
Yeah,
were listening to it yesterday.
good.
What
Yeah,
is
he's
that? You have, there's a link to that. It's
yes,
LB and
long LBBXB, Long Beach. He lives in Long Beach, California. Long Beach, block by block. He's the principal flute for the Pacific Symphony. He's a classical musician, but all over the world, all the symphonies have had to shut down. There's no live performance, so every symphony performer in the world has lost their job, and they don't know when they're going to get it back. And these are very highly specialized people who trained their whole lives basically to do what they do, and now they're left in the cold. I mean, so God bless him. He got a group of his friends, and these are wonderful world-class musicians, and they created this group, and they're doing their own arrangements of very interesting music, and they go and perform in public, and they're becoming wildly popular out in Long Beach. So he's figuring out a way to not only create great music, but also to hopefully pay a few bills. So it's called Long Beach Block by Block. They have a Facebook page. They have a website. Um, it'll be very entertaining if you log on. I don't think you'll regret watching them.
no, they're amazing. And your son is sort of he's like
He
the
started the whole
MC,
thing. Yeah, he started the whole thing.
but he's also helped you a lot with your website, right?
Yeah, well, it was my family. It was my daughter, my son, my nephew. I mean, we're like the Von Trapp family players. It, it's been a lot of fun.
Um, awesome. Was there anything else that we were going to, that I wanted to say? Do you have anything upcoming or anything else you want to add?
Not really. I got a new project, but I'm not going to let that one out of the bag yet. It's
What
it's
do you
coming
mean?
soon. I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, come on.
Oh no, it's
Serious?
it's a super secret thing.
Oh,
This this is going to be the biggest one we did.
oh.
This is big.
Oh, I think you told me. I think you
I
told
think
me. I think when we were walking, you told
when
me.
we were walking, but we've got
Yeah.
it. It's done.
Oh,
Oh
if
yeah.
if you finish another book before I finish my first one, I will be very mad.
No. you're
Um,
you're right there. You're knocking on the door.
I'm not gonna it's due tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
I gotta
Oh my
finish and
gosh.
finish this last chapter. Somebody wait. There's a message saying that they can't get the book on Amazon.
Oh, you can get the book on Amazon.
Okay, so
Which one? Great kids don't just happen.
maybe try again. I don't. I wonder if the link on your maybe go directly to Amazon and see if that works. Maybe that
Go to Amazon. Maybe I need to redo my link.
send him a message if you can't get it. But um, I think you probably can get it. So all right, perfecto. And my cousins were on. Hello, Eileen. I don't know if she's still on. And hello, Adair. I didn't say hello to anybody. And I don't know if my cousin Amy is on. She was on last time. I think I think my dad was on, but I don't see him any longer. And,
He had to go to sleep. He's my
Jennifer,
age,
he had to go.
He had
And
to go to take his nap,
I know. And John, hey, John and Karen and Kelly. Hi, Kelly and Kelly. So my parents, I think, are still on. I hope you all are doing fabulous. So Kelly Daniel, her husband is a musician, and he's got a band called The Grateful. What I showed it to you yesterday.
Yeah, you did. The Grateful
The
what?
Grateful Band. Josh Daniel Grateful Band.
Yeah, I
So,
told my son about it. Let me write that down. He was going to call him.
oh yes.
Yeah,
Oh, he totally should. I'll connect you to
Josh Daniel.
Kelly Daniels. We will make that happen. Um, wait, let me see. Yes, Kelly said, please do her.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
oh,
he's good.
Kelly is sleeping. I'm here. Josh, is that you? Oh, Josh is listening.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Oh, good. He put his info on there. Yes, and he's amazing. Oh my gosh, how fun would it be to have Josh and your son play?
Yeah.
I don't know if they could do it over. Josh, we're gonna hook you up with him. I think that would be awesome. Um, Okay, so I think that, and Maggie is in Boston. Hello. So very good. Thank you. And you did such a fabulous job of hanging with me here, Dr. Smo.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's always fun. And I hope we get invited back, you know.
Of course, we got to make this a regular,
Okay.
at least once a month. So thank you all for listening. You hung with us for a long
Yeah.
time,
Thank
and
you. Good night,
have a
everybody.
good night.